and welcome to the Radical Podcast. This is a free edition of the Radical Podcast, which usually only goes out to our premium subscribers on Radical Media, but this will be going out to all of the tens of thousands of you who have signed up via the Radical Media platform on maajidnawaz.substack.com, as well as live streamed simultaneously on @Maajid Facebook, YouGov, and Rumble. Because we have some breaking news, which is on your screens right about now. And that breaking news is, as you can see from the logo on your screens, announcing the launch of a new organization that we have founded called the Accordists. On your screens now should be the breaking news post from the official Accordists social media page on Twitter. We'll read it for you. Breaking: Accordists press release with our exclusive YouGov poll results on British voter intentions for the conflict in Gaza and better relations between Arabs and Israelis. Please register with Accordists for peace and prosperity in the Middle East here. What is this about? Well, what we have done is launch an organization that seeks to campaign to revive, consolidate, and expand the gains made in the Middle East peace accords signed under Trump's first term, exactly 5 years ago yesterday, when we launched the Accordists on GB News. We'll show you some of those clips in a minute. And that peace deal that was signed under Trump's first term 5 years ago yesterday on September the 15th was a peace deal between certain Arab nations and Israel, known as the Abraham Accords. It's been largely forgotten because of the horrific events of October the 7th. And what our mission as Accordists is to revive the public sentiment for peace via the existing framework that already exists, and that's the framework known as the Abraham Accords. And in seeking to revive, consolidate, and expand the successes of the Abraham Accords, we have called ourselves the Accordists. We encourage all of you to go to accordists.org to register and sign up your interest. And we have released the following press release today, which is on your screens. This press release is already up on our Accordists social media page on Twitter @Accordists. So we won't read that for you now because we're going to show you some media clips around it in just a moment. But accompanying that press release is the full display of the YouGov poll results that we as the Accordists commissioned, surveying British public sentiment, British public opinion towards three key questions that relate to the Abraham peace accords in the Middle East. One of them pertaining to British voter intention with regards to the conflict in Gaza. The other one with regards to how many people have actually heard of the Abraham Accords. And the final one as to how important the British public thinks peace between Arabs and Israelis is. Very important or not very important, scaled down in that way. The results you may well find very interesting. The poll results are contained with the press release that the official Accordists account has released. Here is page 1 of those poll results. Here is page 2. Again, they will be released. They have been, released via the official Accordists Twitter page. If you go there, you can get them, and we will also release them tomorrow or this evening if we have the ability to do so via Radical Media. As usual, the Radical Dispatch, which is the written version of the stream we put out, and you'll be able to find that on maajidnawaz.substack.com with all of the receipts that we show you in this stream. But the breaking news will be on your screens now in the form of an interview that we gave yesterday on the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accord signed under President Trump during his first term. And that was on September the 15th, 2020. Of course, yesterday was September the 15th, 2025. To mark that 5th anniversary, we launched the Accords on GB News, Nigel Farage's show, hosted by Martin Daubney and Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was with us in the studio as well, because he also hosts at GB News. And it was a very successful conversation. We're going to show you some of the highlights. Take a look at this. You'd be forgiven for not having heard of the fact that in President Trump's first term, those peace deals, the Abraham Accords, were signed. That didn't get the media attention then that it deserved, to the point where, again, the YouGov poll that we commissioned discovered that 87% of the British public have not heard of the Abraham Accords. So we find ourselves in this peculiar situation where the overwhelming majority of the British public who expressed an opinion, 91%, want better relations between Arabs and Israelis, but they don't know of the existing framework that's already in place, which acts as a vehicle to get those better relations. 87% of people haven't heard of the Abraham Accords. The purpose of the Accordists was founded to fill that void where the public says, yes, they want better relations. And our point is, well, there exists a vehicle to get those better relations. That's the Abraham Accords. It's a regional and a regionally negotiated approach for peace in the Middle East, and that's what we're about. And so very clear, the overwhelming majority, according to the YouGov polling that we as Accordists commissioned, the overwhelming majority of the British public do support or do consider better relations between Arabs and Israelis to be important. Of those who expressed an opinion, 91% said it's important. Of course, that breaks down further into very important or important, but the press release contains that breakdown for you. We won't get into the technicalities yet here on this stream, but 91% of those who expressed an opinion believe, that's the British public, believe that better relations between Arabs and Israelis are important. The big concern, though, according to this polling, is that we found that 87% of the British public haven't heard of the vehicle that exists to get those better relations between Arabs and Israelis. That vehicle are the Abraham Accords that were signed 5 years ago. It exists, it's in place, but it's been largely forgotten due to the events of October the 7th. The warmongers, we would put it to you, did not want people to remember the peace initiatives. And there are, of course, warmongers on all sides. But in addition to that, there is another reason why 87% of the British public may not have heard of the Abraham Accords, and that's because they were signed 5 years ago yesterday under President Trump in his first term. And we are aware that the corporate media is loath to give credit where credit is due to President Trump. Yes, a very imperfect man, but nevertheless, President of the United States of America, history's strongest superpower, under whom, in his first term, there was a historic peace accords signed between Arabs and Israelis. You would have thought that regardless of whatever corporate media thinks of President Trump, the fact that there were these historic peace accords signed between Arabs and Israelis, between the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and Sudan, who, yes, didn't ratify, but did sign on to the Abraham Accords, that would have been, should have been, greater news or featured more prominently in our corporate news. But it wasn't. And perhaps the reason for that is because it was signed under President Trump, and corporate media, establishment media, has been loath to give credit where credit is due to President Trump. Well, now we're in President Trump's second term. And President Trump today happens to be, this is Tuesday, the 16th of September, happens to be on the first day of his official state visit to this country from where we are streaming, and that is the United Kingdom. He's in London, the capital of the United Kingdom, and that's where we stream and where we launched the Accords, the Accordists yesterday. And our point is to say that in this President Trump's second term, it behooves us all to give more attention to the Abraham Accords. And as we stated, is the mission of the Accordists to revive interest in them, to consolidate on their gains, and to expand on their successes. And of course, President Trump being here, we hope dovetails nicely with this 5th anniversary and our mission as Accordists to revamp and reinvigorate interest in the Abraham Accords. And if the Accordists can act as a vehicle to do so, the aim would be to plug that gap that we just mentioned between the 91% of the British public who expressed an opinion that better relations between Arabs and Israelis is a good thing, and the 87% who haven't heard of the existing framework that exists to bring about those better relations between Arabs and Israelis. And that existing framework is the Abraham Accords. To plug that gap between those who have not heard of the Abraham Accords, while still simultaneously wanting better relations between Arabs and Israelis, the Accordists will seek to campaign through traditional and new media means, globally and online, in order to raise awareness and recreate a public mandate for peace. Because we sense we're in a time where people have begun despairing of peace and not necessarily believing that there is any hope or that peace will ever come. And again, on this note, we're going to show you another highlight from our interview on GB News with Martin Daubney. Before we do, it's important to understand that the interview, these are clips from the interview. The full, longer version of what we're showing you will be published by us in full tomorrow via, or this evening even, via Radical Media on maajidnawaz.substack.com. And we thank you for your subscription to Radical Media on Substack. And here is a message to revive hope for those who may be concerned that or who may be despairing that the war in the Middle East seems never to end. Because the Abraham Accords, when they were signed 5 years ago under Trump's first term, they bumped up the number of countries that began to have relations with Israel and vice versa. And that significantly impacted the metric to a point where over the course of 70 years, the Arab-Israeli relations are better than they've ever been. Morocco, the Emirates, that's UAE, and Bahrain, and Sudan all signed the Abraham Accord. Sudan is yet to ratify, but again, it's an Arab Muslim majority country. And we find in those examples hope, if only people had heard of the Abraham Accords. And so our mission is to revive the sentiment for peace in the Middle East through the Abraham Accords, consolidate the gains we've already made, maybe have countries like Sudan ratify the accords that they signed. Syria, the new leader of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, who has credibility among Sunni Muslims in the region because of the fact that he had a fighting background. He was involved in the overthrow of Assad. He's made overtures just in this last week that the Syrian government may well make some form of security arrangement with Israel. So there is definitely hope. But again, that only comes if we can create a public mandate for it and then our governments work towards it as part of their foreign policy. So yes, we recognize that some people may have begun to despair in the idea of hope and peace coming to the Middle East. But nevertheless, we, with a scientific approach, are able to demonstrate that actually, if you step away from the horrific, and yes, it is horrific, short-term or immediate circumstances that we are faced with, and that is, of course, the war and the ongoing conflicts in Gaza, but also beyond Gaza in the region generally. It was as horrific in Syria when ISIS was engaged there in a civil war. It was as horrific in Yemen when the Saudis and the Iranians were fighting each other via a proxy war there. So war is horrific. It's as horrific in the Ukraine. War is horrific. If we step back from that immediate and horrific vision and look at the long-term trends in the Middle East, this is in regards to, on Accordists.org, we've placed up a metric by which we've used certain measurables to be able to gauge progress in Arab-Israeli relations. And what we're able to tell you for the first time is that actually it's very hopeful. Arab-Israeli relations, and this is going to sound very, very counterintuitive compared to what you see on your TV screens right now, and of course hear about from all the protests and the anger that is out there, understandably so. But we'd like to just present to you a 70-year view, which is the average year, of course, of a human life, because in the time of one lifespan, we are actually in a better state vis-a-vis Arab-Israeli relations than we have ever been for the last 70 years if we put in place certain metrics such as trade, embassies, and so on and so forth. And that is visually demonstrated by the graph that is on your screens now. This is our 70-year recognition index. Of course, it's long-term. The war in Gaza occurred over the last 5 years. We will be putting up a 5-year recognition index. Of course, we have to look at the short-term and look at what the effects of the war have been. But until we do so, we've just launched, this 70-year one does provide hope because it demonstrates, again, it's back up on your screens, and you can see at the end there, beyond 2020 with the 3 lines, those are, of course, the dotted line in red signed at, indicated below there is the Organization of Islamic Countries. The red line is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation or Islamic countries weighted. The dotted green line is the Arab League, and the solid green line is the Arab League weighted. The weighted lines, just to explain what you're looking at there versus the non-weighted, the weighted lines in the index, when we measured all of the various metrics, who has diplomatic relations, who has trade, who is, for example, recognizes Israel and who doesn't, when we've looked at all of that, the weighted index considers also the ratio of spend versus GDP on military costs. So those countries will be weighted and will be more important to have better relations with Israel because, by way of example, there is, for example, tiny Muslim majority nations whose decision of whether or not, and they may be somewhere in, who knows, Asia or Africa, whose decision or on whether or not they recognize Israel doesn't necessarily change the chessboard or the landscape too much, because they are strategically not military powers that could jeopardize the stability of the region. Whereas a nation such as Turkey, for example, that has a huge and active military, or a nation like Pakistan, which is the Muslim world's only nuclear superpower, or nuclear power, I should say, or a nation such as neighboring countries such as Egypt, Syria, they would, of course, or should be weighted in a different way because they have an immediate impact on the war. So we've presented figures that are both weighted and non-weighted, just so we understand that it's the weighted figures that make more strategic sense. And despite that, what we can see from the graph that is on your screens now is both weighted and non-weighted for Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries and Arab League countries. The graph here, which is our 70-year recognition index, indicates that relations between Arabs and Israelis are in fact at a historic peak. And that is important because that's a 70-year view. All four lines there you saw were at their peak. That's a 70-year view. And the reason they're at their peak, even though that sounds really unbelievable at the moment, considering the conflict in Gaza, but the reason they're at their peak, it does make sense, is because of the Abraham Accords signed in 2020. What happened, and you can see there with that sudden bump, what happened is that since the assassination of Anwar al-Sadat, the president of Egypt, who was assassinated in 1981 for attempting to make peace with Israel, the entire project of peace in the region has stalled because no other Arab leaders wanted to come forward and risk being assassinated as well, or even if they did try, such as in the Palestinian attempts with Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, and Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, where it was tried again. Rabin was assassinated. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated this time by an Israeli, of course, with Sadat by an Egyptian. They were assassinated by their own people. So peace talks had stalled, and yet it's why it's so significant that in Trump's first term 5 years ago yesterday, suddenly, out of nowhere, for the first time since those assassinations, suddenly the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and Sudan signed on to the Abraham Accords. So 4 countries suddenly signed on to a peace accords with Israel, and that's what bumped the 70-year recognition index, taking it to an all-time high. Because, of course, if your baseline is abysmal, any increase, in this case it was an increase of 4, is going to shoot up like that. And so, yes, it's a very low starting point, but that demonstrates that to go from a low starting point to suddenly having 4 countries sign up only 5 years ago, which, by the way, was previously unimaginable. Take that from us. We look at this issue day in, day out, and have been living and breathing it for most of our lives. It was very unusual for that to have been able to happen under Trump's first presidential term, that 4 countries signed on board to the Abraham Accords, 4 Arab Muslim majority countries signed on board to recognize and deal with, vice versa as well, for Israel to recognize them and them to recognize Israel under the Abraham Accords. And so it should have attracted a great deal of media attention, and it didn't. And the reason it didn't, we've mentioned before, is perhaps because it was Trump. Perhaps some people support war and have given up on peace, but nevertheless, it should have attracted a lot more attention than it did. And our recognition index shows you that we're at a historic high in terms of long-term relations between Arabs and Israelis. And as we just showed you in that clip, that is cause for hope. And if we can only revive, consolidate, and expand the Abraham Accords, we can continue building on that hope. And if now is not the time to call for peace in the midst of this catastrophic war in the Middle East, then when is the time to call for peace? If you're saying to us that you're despairing at the chances of peace, then that is precisely why the mission of the Accordists is needed now more than ever, because the purpose of the Accordists is to provide a vision for peace in the form of the Abraham Accords and demonstrate practically it can happen, as it did happen 5 years ago yesterday. So we therefore seek to revive, consolidate on, and expand the successes of the Abraham Accords. And in demonstrating how that's possible, we now take you to what we said about Syria. This is a news clipping from Roya News. Headlined, Syria's Ahmed al-Shara says country is in talks with Israel over a security agreement. So in the clip we just showed you on GB News, where we launched the Accordists yesterday with Martin Daubney on Nigel Farage's show, we mentioned Syria as potentially another country that could come on board with the Abraham Accords. It isn't going to happen just yet, but Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Shara, who has a great deal of respect among the majority of Muslims in the world, who happen to be Sunni Muslims, because he was involved in the fight against and overthrow of Assad, the dictator of Syria. And if this former fighter, known formerly as Jolani, now as Prime Minister Ahmed al-Shara of Syria, if he can make peace overtures towards Israel, it is incredibly strategically significant because of the weight and influence he carries among Sunni Muslims, including among Islamists and jihadists. It is incredibly important that Ahmed al-Shara continues in the direction we've shown you this headline suggests that he is headed in, and that is a security agreement with Israel. This headline is only from a few days ago. It is fresh news. Over the course of this last year, there have been multiple headlines in that vein about Syria making peace gestures towards Israel and vice versa. Only look them up. You can see them for yourself. So again, that provides us hope as well. And if Syria does that, again, we cannot overstate the strategic significance of Syria doing so. But one suspects that to do so, Ahmed al-Shara of Syria would require Turkish and Saudi approval in order to proceed with that. But it may well be something that is unavoidable, because the strategic implications of needing to resolve the ongoing dispute in the Golan Heights, Ahmed al-Shara taking his nom de guerre al-Jolani from that region, the Golan, of course, it'd be incredibly difficult for him to leave that unresolved, especially since his nom de guerre relied on the Golan Heights as part of the reason for why he was fighting. Al-Jolani refers to somebody who comes from the Golan. Of course, he's Syrian. He has every right to be concerned about resolving the dispute in the Golan Heights, and therefore it may well be it may well necessitate a deal, regardless of what the Saudis or the Turks are inclined to do. They may well have no choice in the end but to support the Prime Minister of Syria in settling with Israel whatever terms they arrive at through negotiations. The purpose of the Accordists isn't to dictate those terms, nor is it to dictate a solution to the regional problem of the conflict in the Middle East. The purpose of the Accordists is simply to promote the framework for that solution, which is the regionally negotiated framework known as the Abraham Accords. We're not even wedded to the name Abraham Accords. Accordists could call the peace treaty by any name. Accordists means agreeable by definition. So the issue is not the name. The issue is that the framework should be a regional approach, negotiated settlement for peace in the Middle East. And that is something that we will campaign for, and we are able to say there is hope in, because of our 70-year index that we have placed on our website, accordists.org, on your screens again right now, but also because countries like Syria may well, in the medium term, end up agreeing security agreements with Israel, as that headline there suggests. And on that note, we're going to bring you another clip from our interview on Nigel Farage's show on GB News with host Martin Daubney, launching the Accordists yesterday. This is not an Israel-Palestinian Authority problem. It simply, frankly, isn't. And if we continue to try and approach it in that way, we're in danger of repeating the same thing, making the same mistake, which is the definition of madness. We've got to come to a realization. So what we're saying there, just because the clip at the beginning was slightly cut, we're making it clear that the Israel-Palestine conflict is not a bilateral conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. It is not a conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. It is not a bilateral conflict. That may sound strange to your ears. We're assuring you it simply is not a bilateral conflict. It is a conflict between Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia in the region. And that's three parties. There's a fourth party in the region, and that's the parties the Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and Sudan that signed up to the peace accords. The fourth party, the group, are the parties that want peace. But there is a Saudi element to the regional conflict, an Iranian element to the regional conflict, and an Israeli element to the regional conflict. And then there is a peace element to the regional conflict, making it a multifaceted conflict, not a bilateral conflict. And that's the point we're about to make in this clip. And it's why only a regional solution will do. The regional problem requires a regional solution, and the Abraham Accords are a regional approach to a regionally negotiated solution. And that's what the Accordists champion. That's what we're about. And now we're going to play that clip again from Nigel Farage's show on GB News. With that context, here is Martin Daubney interviewing us about that topic last night on the 5th anniversary of President Trump signing the Abraham Accords. This is not an Israel-Palestinian Authority problem. It simply, frankly, isn't. And if we continue to try and approach it in that way, we're in danger of repeating the same thing, making the same mistake, which is the definition of madness. We've got to come to a realization that this is, in fact, a regional problem, and therefore it must have a regional solution, a regionally negotiated solution. What do I mean by the fact that it's a regional problem? Well, at the end of the day, it's Iran that funds, we know this, Iran funds the terrorist organization Hamas in Gaza. Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon, arms and funds, and Iran arms and funds the Houthis in Yemen. So you've got one regional country there, Iran, clearly involved. On the other side, you've got Saudi Arabia that fought a bitter civil war with Iran inside Yemen. It's tragic as it is. It's got nothing to do with Israel there. That's a Saudi-Iranian war. So now we've introduced three different countries fighting each other, Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, all fighting each other in that region. And we haven't even gotten to those other countries we named who are trying to make peace with Israel in the same region, such as the UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain. Okay. So that kind of demonstrates the multipolarity of this. It's a regional problem, and it must have a regional solution. And that there, what you just heard, is the mission of the Accordists. It's to revive, consolidate, and expand the regional approach to the regional problem of conflict in the Middle East. And that regional approach, 5 years ago, was signed under President Trump. It's known as the Abraham Accords. The Accordists seek to revive, consolidate, and expand the Abraham Accords, and we need your help in doing so as well. We have just launched yesterday. We have a trip planned to Washington, D.C. to launch as well in the United States of America. As we mentioned earlier, we launched in London, but it's appropriate we're in London right now because President Trump is in London as well. And we seek to make sure that we have grabbed his attention in the absolute necessity of reviving the regional peace initiative known as the Abraham Accords, so that we can put an end once and for all to the horrific business of war in the Middle East and have a lasting period of peace, which is what everybody, we have no doubt, wants. 91% of the British public who gave an opinion said that they believe better relations between Arabs and Israelis is important. And yet only 87% had heard of the framework that already exists to bring about those better relations, and that's the Abraham Accords. The job of the Accordists is to fill that void, that gap of knowledge, the 87% who haven't heard of the Abraham Accords, and show them that these accords provide the regional solution of better relations between Arabs and Israelis that 91% of those who express an opinion want. So if we can impact President Trump while he's here with that message, we'd be glad to do so. We will also head over to Washington, D.C. to impact the capital of the United States of America with the same message. These are early days, but we have many plans, and we require your help in pushing out this and popularizing this message. The first thing we would like you all to do is go to accordists.org and register for better relations in the Middle East and for peace and prosperity in the Middle East under our Join Us tab. That page is on your screens now. Register as an Accordist. All we require is your name, first name, last name, and your email address. That way you get updates from us and you join our mailing list. Register as an Accordist. That's action number one we need you to do. Action number two that we'd require is also on the website, not under Join Us, but under We Are Accordists. If you hit that button on the top right of the website, you'll be taken to a page where you can print out the Accordist logo, which is what we showed you at the beginning of this stream. There it is, the Accordist logo. You can print it out for free on accordists.org. Just hit the tab that says We Are Accordists. Once you've printed it out, we'd like for you to go to our social media at Accordists on Twitter and Instagram, and post a photo of yourself holding this sign in support of the Accordist mission for peace and prosperity in the Middle East. And here's a sample for you that we did yesterday at the GB News studio. That is us holding the Accordist sign with the hosts, Martin Daubney and Jacob Rees-Mogg, on the Nigel Farage show. We'd like you to do the same with the Accordist sign by going to our website and posting it on our socials. Tag us at Accordists. Let's get the word out and let's help stabilize the world and avoid further conflict, which is only ruinous for everybody involved and not involved. Now, of course, if you're on the left, it's very clear that people oppose war on largely moral and humanitarian grounds. If you're on the right and you're concerned about migration, which, by the way, the YouGov poll that we push out surveys in question 1, that's on your screens right now, what the most important voter intention issue is if there were to be a general election in the UK. And of course, migration is the one. Now, if you're concerned about migration and you're planning to vote Reform UK, understand this, that there is no way, there is simply no way to stop any of this until we fix the problem at source. If we do not stop the wars in the Middle East, we will not stop the flow of human beings seeking to escape those wars. The less stable those countries are, the more people are going to want to leave them, because the worse opportunities, economic especially, and educational, and even just human life opportunities they're going to have in those countries. We have to stop those wars. Stopping those wars and stabilizing the region will mean that we also stabilize our own social fabric, which is also tearing itself apart at the seams at the moment. So whether you're on the left and support stopping wars for humanitarian and moral reasons, that's a great thing, or you're on the right and you support stopping wars because you're concerned about their impact on us domestically, we don't mind why you want to stop the war. We are a non-party political organization that is unaligned to political parties and works with all of them for one objective only, and that is to stop the war. We don't care who you are. If you want to stop the war, we'll work for you, and we will, and this is an assurance from us, we will be immune to the criticisms of anyone who complains that we're standing not with your favorite politician, but with your most disliked politician. How dare you stand with that person? Why don't you stand with that person? Bring that person to me. We'll take a photograph of them holding the Accordist sign and we'll stand with them too. Anybody who wants to stop the war immediately and return to a negotiated regional solution is welcome to stand with us, regardless of which side of the political aisle they come from. And that's why we have these photos such as these with conservative politician Jacob Rees-Mogg there in the photograph, and GB News host Martin Daubney. Whoever supports stopping the wars there and returning to a regional approach via the Abraham Accords, we will gladly receive that support from them as a non-party political and non-politically aligned organization. Accordists simply are interested in stopping the war and returning to a regional and regionally negotiated solution for the Middle East. So the first thing, as we said, that you can do for us is register on the website via accordist.org and go to the Join Us tab. The second thing is take a photo of yourself with our logo and then post that logo on our socials at Accordists, of you holding the logo and promoting the message of the Accordists. And the third thing we'd ask you to do is to share the interview that we've been showing you from GB News. That, as you can see, is on the Accordists social page. That's from Twitter, this one, at Accordists. It's also on Instagram, at Accordists. We'd ask you to share that video because it summarizes the basic mission of the Accordists in the form of the clips that we just showed you. That's all we've got time for today, for the Radical Show. This special breaking news edition of the Radical Show will go out live to everybody that subscribes to Radical Media, and you will find all of the resources we've shown you today, including the media clips, on maajidnawaz.substack.com, which is the home of Radical Media on Substack. We'll provide all of this, all the receipts, as we say, to you all if you go there. In the meanwhile, thank you all very much. We ask you to support the Accordists. Go and visit accordist.org and register your interest. And most importantly, spread word. Spread word of this stream. Spread word to your friends and family. Spread the materials, the press release, the YouGov poll results, Spread it all, because people are beginning to despair in peace, and there is hope. This is a message of hope. It's a message of peace, and it is a non-aligned, crucially, message of peace. The only thing we are interested in is stopping the suffering. Enough is enough. And with that, we thank you very much for tuning in. And until next time, you're listening to The Radical, Maajid Nawaz.